Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everybody at home. I am Drew Aldover, product manager here at Phase One. Grateful to be joined by Niels Knudsen, our image quality professor and keeper of all things quality here at Phase One. So we'd like to welcome you to our Blue Ring Lens webinar. And as you can see on the table, we have quite a stockpile of all of our lens offerings. What we're going to do in this webinar, and excuse me, I'm getting a little bit of a cold. What we're going to go over in this webinar is basically just what makes a blue ring lens, what sets it apart from the previous lens range, as well as what is unique about each specific one. So there's really only a few that we're going to go over in great detail, as these are new lenses to our lens range, new focal lengths, and then a few other ones here and there to just kind of illustrate the finer points of what makes them so nice. And of course, as many of you may have heard yesterday, we have recently released two new lenses to our blue ring lens range. They are by no means small, but we have the 40 to 80 blue ring now and the 75 to 150 blue ring. So we'll be going over those with Niels, and at any point in time, if you guys have any questions, we have David Grover, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar, moderating the webinar, so he'll be able to answer all your questions, and then at the end forward on any of those questions to us, or more specifically to Niels, to answer in great detail. So Niels, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Just good?
Looking forward to this.
Yeah? Good, me too. That's a good thing. We're off to a great start. So what does it take to be a blue ring lens? So the first thing that I want to go over is the philosophy behind the blue ring lenses. So of course, right off the back, everything is built to be full frame 645. Right? We have some crop sensor digital backs, but we're certainly not developing lenses to accommodate those and only those. That kind of pigeonholes us, and I think you'll agree that we are a true medium format company. So we champion the full frame 645 format. So right out of the gate, everything is built to be 645 and really resolve, every corner to corner, nice and bright, nice and sharp, as best we can with the optical technology we're using, and the revised design. So we have here the 110, which is one of my favorite lenses, and as you can see, just the build quality in general is much improved. Now the optical quality between these two is slightly improved. It's fine-tuned, but it's not an overhaul of the optics of the lens. We've overhauled the actual design and the build quality, and then we've really put the screws down to the tolerance. So that gets down to, revising the design, building a robust quality so that we have more longevity for the lens, and tighter production tolerances. So, why do we have tighter production tolerances? Well, as you're, I'm sure, aware and very excited about, the 100 megapixel digital back. We've sold a few hundred at this point, and we keep on trucking. And so that digital back, the resolving power of that, which has kept a grin on your face ever since we released it in January, that really does need tighter tolerances to make sure that everything is perfectly sharp. And if you were at the last webinar, I talked about the hyperfocal tool with the XF. And setting that up to just get the difference between what autofocus thinks is in focus and then what the digital back needs to be, that tack sharp. So that's where the tighter tolerances come in, to make sure that everything is as up to your standards as it possibly can be. And then, of course, the last one on there is advanced internal components. Right? Yeah. When we had the opportunity to redesign the lenses, we put in unique identifying badges on the actual electronics,
which is actually a very, very nice feature that once you have, if you're doing trimming for really precise focusing on this lens and this camera,
right,
it remembers the setting of it. So
that specific lens.
That specific lens, so you can just swap in any other lens, and the camera system with the lens would know exactly where it is the perfect focus for that lens.
And the older versions, the older, I guess, silver ring, we can call them, it'll remember the focal length. So it'll remember that this is a 110, this is an 80, and it'll set your adjustments specifically. But if you're a rental house, for example, or if you have two camera kits, a backup perhaps with two different lenses, you want to know which lens is set for which focus trim, hyperfocal, and the camera will recognize that specifically. So, beefing up the internals, great. So redesigning the existing focal lengths. So we had some focal lengths previously, and I have this beautiful example here to illustrate. So this is the 35 mil phase 1 lens. So previously Mamiya build, it's a focal plane shutter lens only, so there's no leaf shutter within it. It is 35 millimeters f3.5, and it's nice and small, you can fit it in your pocket. But the quality of this lens was not up to the standards when we started, you know, really getting up there in the in the resolution race.
Yeah.
Right. So one of my favorite focal lengths. I mean, it really is nice. It's not too wide, and it's you know, but the quality wasn't there. So what did we do? We redesigned the 35. So here we have another item from phase 1 that's been keeping a smile on your face, Nils.
Yeah.
So this is the redesigned 35. So we put the two together, it's a significant difference.
Yeah.
But the quality offerings of this, and again, this is a leaf shutter, is significantly improved over the previous 35. Not to say you couldn't, you know, use this, and lots of people still do that. It's just on POTUS in Ireland, and one of our phase 1 customers has been using this pretty much the whole time. And of course, this does take up a bit more space, a bit more weight, but the quality of this lens is
it's in a whole new league.
right.
I can say.
And still, it's the same 35 millimeter focal length, f3.5. So identical technically, but certainly not in quality. And again, when we launched the XF back in June, it's already been a year. How time flies. We redid the 120 because we had a 120 macro manual focus that was focal plane shutter. Then we had a 120 autofocus that was focal plane shutter, and now we have the 120 leaf shutter macro lens. So again, not just a redesign on the outside, but a redesign optically. The 120 we didn't have to change too much. We just had to improve it slightly and offset for the leaf shutter lens. But you know, where we can improve the optics of the lens, we certainly do. So the 35 is our newest complete redesign, which is again kept you smiling since last June. And continued compatibility. It's important to point out that, you know, yes, this is a new lens line with new internal electronics, as well as, you know, the external build and tighter tolerances, all the rest of it, but we've always kept the legacy compatibility. So, you know, you can still use the teleconverter. You don't need a blue ring teleconverter. The extension rings, and of course, if you have a DF or a DF Plus, backwards compatibility for your studio backup or whatever it is. So that's a really important factor, I think, at phase 1. How long ago did the IQ1s come out? Was it 2009 maybe?
Yeah, around that time.
Somewhere around, or 2011. And it's been at least 5 or 6 years, right? And yet the XF camera system that came out last year still supports that digital back generation. So, you know, backwards compatibility and maintaining compatibility with all of your hard-earned products is a very important thing in phase 1. So ensuring that we have that compatibility is very important. And then advancing integration. We mentioned briefly the advanced electronics. So, you know, you have the unique identifier. So you have a unique identifier for the blue ring lenses as opposed to the previous versions, which means that your hyperfocal distance and focus trim are, of course, remembered instantly. And then we have advanced communications for future tools. So, you know, improving the lenses internally as well as externally and optically allows us to, in the future, with all the things we can build into the XF, really just keep on building and improving upon it and advancing all that. And then this is really your realm, right?
Yeah.
So Nils, being the image quality professor, he's always stuck up in our studio doing all sorts of tests on prototypes and even things that have been recently released. You're kind of the third, fourth, fifth check of quality control just to make sure that nothing's drifting away from where it should be and always on point. So we've been working with Schneider for 7 years, you know? And in that 7 years, we've had the opportunity to kind of refine some of the components of these lenses, of the leaf shutter lenses. Being a medium format camera system, the only medium format camera system that has 2 shutters, you know, working with Schneider gives us the opportunity to put in the leaf shutter lens, and then we can start refining that technology. So with the 7 years of the previous versions of the leaf shutter lenses, we were always, you know, improving the shutter technology and the tolerances of the lens. And then the blue ring was really kind of the new base level, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
So once we got to the blue ring, that's where the tolerances, you know, were really tightened down to, you know, ensure they perform. The shutter in the lens, now we have shutters that, you know, can perform 250, 300,000 captures without a problem. And then, of course, the reliability of lenses to always be precise, always be accurate. If you need to focus trim them, once you do it, everything's dialed in and not going to drift, not going to have any variations. So, you know, that 7-year, I guess, learning cycle for us, being new to the camera system world and working with Schneider, really helped us to refine everything to a point where now we can come out with a new line of lenses that really illustrates everything we've been working hard towards. This isn't our shutter, by the way. I just found it on the internet. But it looks good, doesn't it? Yeah. So, without further ado, Nils, I'll let you take over. We have some image samples that you'll go over.
Yeah.
And then we'll just kind of talk a little bit about each lens. Do you want to swap seats here? And
Yeah,
you can stand over here.
I will go closer to
All
you.
right. Head on over. And if you want, if you click here, we can get everybody to see the Capture One software. So you guys will still be able to follow along back here with the presentation, but we'll get you to do a screen share in Capture One. So everyone should now see Capture One, our beautiful faces, and then we have the presentation back here we can walk you through. So if we start with the 35, which again I can't illustrate how excited you've been for the past year with this lens.
Yeah. I, of course, knew the older lenses and I knew all the weak points of it.
Right.
And definitely the older one you could never get sharp images in the corners if you were using it wide open. You really had to stop it down between 11 and 14 to get the best out of it. But one of the first things that this lens really opened up for me was the ability. You can operate it at wide open and it's sharp corner to corner. I have never seen anything like that. So if you're doing shots at dawn or early in the morning, you can benefit from this ability to run it wide open. But still, again, if you stop it down, 8, 11, it still maintains all the details. So it's for me. I really love working with this lens.
And if we start with the, we're starting with the 35. We do have a wider lens.
Yeah.
We do have the 28, which I have here, which is certainly no slouch when it comes to size and weight. But this isn't a blue ring lens.
No.
We start our blue ring offerings at the 35 mil.
Yeah.
And that's really because everything that we just went over to talk about the quality and the offerings and everything we can guarantee with the lenses.
Yeah.
I think it was really you that just said, I can't feel good about that on the 28. The 28, it is what it is. It's a great lens.
It's definitely a very, taking how wide it is into account. It's a great lens. But having that wide lens with this design, you will have quite a bit of chromatic aberration in the corners.
Right.
It doesn't have much distortion, but you really have to stop it down, and you have to use the lens tool in Capture One. Automatically, a lot of correction are applied to the lens if you use it. But I would say I find that you need to tweak your files. It needs a little extra work to get the most out of it. It's much more difficult to use. It's not just something you put on and take a picture and you can let it go. And
to say, if we wanted to tighten the tolerances of this lens to make it, that much better and then kind of embody the blue ring, it's not something that we feel is a responsible decision. So so the other ones we can kind of, turn the screws on and tighten up a little bit so they're where we want them to be and hold that blue ring quality. but the 28 is one that, although a great lens,
Yeah.
is one that is outside of that promise.
So just as an example, what we do when we do lens correction
Mhm.
here, I have a shot I actually did with the different lenses here of this botanical garden. So we can see with the 28, of course, in the center,
It's great.
yeah, that's the easy part. What becomes difficult is actually when you look into the corners but still here I have been shooting at stop down.
Right.
The lens correction has been applied, and we get I would say very good result.
Acceptable.
Yeah. But if you see just to see why it's not a blue ring lens, if I take like the raw data,
Right.
we see the raw data, we would actually see how much chromatic aberration it out
And
of.
that's a great example to see with the
Yeah.
white of the truck and everything. So
And in here we see definitely a huge amount of chromatic aberration. If you see, and we go back here, this is the corrected one. So
and that's all done in Capture One, all
Yeah,
that
yeah,
adjustment
yeah,
and everything. So it's certainly possible to get everything right out of the gate, with automatic corrections in Capture One where you want it, but to have that build of a lens that produces that by default is not something we want to be blue ring.
So if we just compare, let's say, now we have the 35 millimeter,
Right?
and yes, no surprise, it's
Sharp in the center.
sharp in the center. But now we have also at the corner,
Right.
it's really sharp. And even if I remove the chromatic aberration correction for the lens tool, you don't see it.
Right.
There's so little chromatic aberration in the design. So we've really been like, for the design of the lens, taking into account that we want it to be with so little chromatic aberration, because even though you can correct a lot of it, it kind of is a challenge for the final image quality if
Yeah.
there's too much of
And
it.
if we can build it right without having to worry about it in software, all the better.
So
So I guess that's what accounts for the size
Yeah.
difference.
there's also a very special thing built into this lens, which I can show down here in one of the other examples. In this one here, actually, if you are just on a tripod shooting at infinity,
Mm-hmm.
the design of the lens is that the focal plane is just a little bit curved, tiny. So that means that you can hardly see. I can see it because I know.
Because
but,
you're
but
always
normal
fixing
people
people.
would not be able to see it.
Right.
But that helped us to gain another 4 or 5 meters in the foreground
Of sharpness.
of sharpness.
Right.
So if you compare this lens to a Rodenstock technical camera lens, 35 millimeter,
Right.
that would be a tiny more sharp at the horizon, but you would lose sharpness up to 4 or 5 meters in the foreground.
So it's hardware hyperfocal.
Yeah. So of course, if you take this as an example, is of course we are really sharp here in the center.
Yeah.
But now all the way down here to the corner, it is just incredible sharp.
Yeah.
So, and if you want to do that with a Rodenstock, you have to struggle a little bit. You have to really work with your hyperfocal
Right.
point to get that in.
Or focus stack.
Yeah. Or focus that. Yeah.
Great. Anything else you want to talk about the 35? And again, my third point here makes Nils happy.
Yeah.
So that's good enough for us. And again, that's it's a completely new optical design, which is significant. And then we move on to the 55. So the 55, which is here. Yep. So the 55, it's an existing optical design.
Mhm.
So it's the same optical design we had with the previous, the silver ring. But again, it's been modified and the tolerances have been tweaked and the electronics have been upgraded. And this is one of my favorite focal lengths.
Yeah.
If it's small enough, it's only slightly bigger than the 80. Throw it in your bag, and it's versatile for pretty much everything. When I was just in Ireland, I was actually shooting wildlife with it, with 100 megapixel, zooming in 100%, and then just making my crops from there. So for outdoor shooting as well as studio photography, it's same optical design we've always had, but just made that much better.
Yeah.
And of course it fits. Do you have any examples from the 55?
Yeah, and I also want to add comments to this one because this is also, I will never go anywhere without this lens. And it does a lot of things for me. First of all, it is actually a really sharp lens.
Mm-hmm.
It also is designed with this a little bit of curved focal plane,
Right.
which means that for most landscape images you would compare to any other lens design, you would see that your foreground close to you is sharp and crisp, again by losing just a tiny bit on the horizon line.
Right.
But this helps you for classic landscape photography to get really a huge depth of field. This is a 55 millimeter. It's not easy for normal 55 meters to get a large depth of field. That's one great thing about it. The other great thing is that the bokeh is actually really, really pleasant. The way that it renders these out of focus, whether it's front of you or behind, it just comes out with a very soft, pleasing, which I really enjoy with this lens. And
again, I mean, that's where it fits for the studio. I mean, wide angle portraits, of course, is not the norm, but when you do go for it, you can't have something that's that's gonna ruin the image. So you need that good bokeh to make everything pleasing.
And I have some few examples.
This is your more reportage using an XF on a boat.
Yeah.
You live dangerously, Nils.
This is from an old 12-meter yacht from the 1930s that has been renovated, and this is shot in 2.8. We can see through down into the compass.
Yeah.
4 again. Tons of sharp details up front. Nice, creamy, soft. F5, we can keep like action inside here.
Can I see you in that one?
Yeah, I should
Zoom
be.
in right there. Is that you?
Yeah, I'm a little bit distorted. I'm very flat here.
Oh, there you were just hiding in the hole. Everyone else is doing the work.
And here at 5.6, even 5.6 gives you again a soft background, and again details where you put the focus is just fantastic.
Yeah.
So you can use it for like reportage, portraits, semi-body,
right, and of course out in the field.
Yeah.
So there's really nothing that lens can't do. And if we look at the standard, of course, the 80. The 80 is the workhorse, right? I'll try and do this without knocking over a lens this time. So the 80 is the workhorse, and it's actually gotten a little bit smaller when we've kind of refined it, because this is something that's in everybody's camera kit, right? And so we need to make it one that's bulletproof, that's small, that's light, and just going to do everything it needs to do. And it's between the 80 and the 55 for most industrial purposes. Is really what everyone uses. So this has to, be a workhorse. And, the image example I used that I showed on the last webinar, it's an aerial shot, shooting straight down. So it's a best opportunity to judge your, corner-to-corner sharpness. And in this sample, everything is, flat, easy, and just fantastic. So, again, the exact same optical design, but refined to a point of zero tolerance, really. So it's as good as it's going to get, and it's built to work. So the new design, and I think the 80 really exemplifies that, is really a tough design. It's made to work. We're not making show pony lenses here. This thing is built to be knocked around and really put to work. It's a tool through and through. Yeah. So I had one example in Capture One that I had with that 80 that I thought we could just go over real quick. So if we go to the 80 mil, why can't I find it? Thank you. So this is that example shot, from the helicopter. And again, when you zoom into the dead center, everything is as sharp as it's going to be. You can see all the tire tracks and everything. It's shot with the 100 meg. But then if you get down to the actual corners of it, you're going to be in the same position you were. So here's down here on the road, we can see all the tire tracks. You can see all the wires from the fence and from the telephone poles right down in the corner. And then even down in this corner, you can pretty much see each individual mango.
Yeah.
So, you know, this lens is built just to work and work and work. And this is really kind of where it started. You know, this was, it's not the first one that we released, the 80 mil, but it's the first one that we redesigned and really, you know, had the notion that these new blue ring lenses, these new designs have to be bulletproof. So moving on to the 110. So the 110, you know, it's important to note that the 110 is the fastest and longest lens that we have. So it's about equivalent to an 85 in the 35 millimeter world, and it's f2.8. So once we get longer in focal length, we're getting a little bit slower in terms of aperture. So f2.8 at 110, which is equivalent to an 85, it's fantastic for studio work, for portraiture. Again, when you go back to that bokeh, you need something that's, you know, nice and soft and creamy for those portraits. Because your next go-to lens for portraiture is a 150, which is a 3.5. So it's just the tiniest bit slower. And if you want that, you know, challenge up the field before it's just the iris and nothing else, you know, this is really the go-to lens. And of course, you and I not spending too much time in the studios with our models, but out in the field, you know, it makes for a great landscape lens. You know, I find it compresses everything just enough that you get a good depth in the image, but it's not like using a 240 where everything is just kind of slammed up and flattened. So for certain examples, it's great. And then I had this example, if you want to find that in the software, just to kind of go over the you know, again, the chromatic aberration and everything and the quality of the lens. So if you zoom in on some of those tree branches there, you know, everything is tack sharp and, you know, backlit by all those clouds in the sun. And again, no chromatic aberration, no purple fringing, none of that, none of the stuff you would typically be fearful of. So a great all-around lens for sure.
This you shot at f8.
yeah. And that's just because you know, it was bright out. So I hope you guys are getting some good questions that you can get to David for the end of the webinar. We'll move on to the 120.
Yeah.
This is your watch, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So the 120 macro, again, based on a previous optical design, but we did, you know, refine it so that we could use the leaf shutter. It's again not a small lens. You're not going to fit this one in your pocket. But it is macro, it is autofocus, it is leaf shutter, so it has everything you could possibly want in a lens. And it's you know, certainly when we built the focus stacking tool, this was the lens this was the go-to. And this is a focus stacked image. I took the liberty of stacking it for you last night. So improved optical design, and you know, really this was when we were doing a focus stack tool, this is the lens that we were using, of course, to kind of measure everything. So it's very, very fine focus. Anybody that has an XF that's used the focus stacking tool or the hyperfocal tool with perhaps an 80, you'll notice that the lens range for that is maybe 400 units. MCUs are called, motor control units. With this one, you're talking 600, 700, 800, because the movements of this lens are so fine for the macro work.
I think we should take a look at this image. How easily I made it, because with this stacking feature, basically what you do is that you go into live view and you set your focus at where you want to start having the sharpest.
The far point?
Yeah, and then you point to somewhere down here.
Yep.
And you said, okay, maybe I need 10 images.
Yeah, so let's show those images, and then you shot it at what, f4?
No, I actually maybe f8 and we will see why because the depth of field once you get going is really narrow.
Yeah.
So if it maybe this is one of the middle shots.
Yeah.
We can see that basically we have a few millimeters, so starting, the first one here is sharp out at this end, and the last one. But the amazing part is that with this focus stacking, you just set it up, and the system does the whole range of shots.
Yep.
We get them into Capture One. It's named as a stack, so you can identify the group of images.
Bring it out to Helicon.
Bring it into Helicon, and that software then stack them. This is a process that takes maybe
a minute.
Yeah.
And I did put in here, I think, I put in a TIFF that was the stacked image. I didn't make it full size.
Yeah. This one here. So if we just zoom into this one here, we now see that from this end.
You're not going to sell that watch with that image, by the way.
It should have been cleaned much better. But
a well-used watch.
Very, very easy done. I did this just to show the tools for exhibition, and it took me less than 5 minutes to do everything.
And the quality of the lens, I mean, when you're doing macro work like that, you know, macro work lighting is never easy if you want to get it right. And when you're focus stacking, if there's any type of, you know, chromatic aberration or any imperfection in the lens, when you focus stack, then you'll see it 10 times over. You know, each slice will be imperfect. So having that lens be as razor sharp and as perfect as possible is absolutely pinnacle. And you know, the difference between this one and the previous focal plane shutter autofocus, it isn't much, but when you put them side by side, it's enough. So if macro work is really, you know, what you're after, then this lens is the one to be using. And the 150, again, this would be the go-to portrait, and you know, it's nice for landscape because it's compatible with the 2x converter. So with a simple, you know, accessory, it's now a 300 millimeter.
Yep.
It is manual focus with the 2x converter, but it's a 300 mil lens. And again, existing optical design, refined, and built to, you know, a level where the tolerances are perfect. So. Not the biggest lens, not the smallest lens, but and you know, not the heaviest lens either, which is welcome when you're, you know, working with these things. So when you think the alternative is a 75 to 150, which you can, you know, that's hefty, or just the 150, it's a nice, beautiful lens for, you know, your portraiture or your landscape. Yeah, and do you have the examples for that one for the sharpness?
Yeah. Let me see. It is. So
this is just in your backyard, isn't it?
Yeah. This is how we live in Denmark.
So everyone's got a castle and a palace in the backyard.
Of course, here we have really lots of details. If we look up here, 1 pixel wide structures are rendered up here in the top of.
And which back was it shot with?
That's a 100 megapixel. So it's.
Do you shoot with anything else these days?
No. So and go out here. Also see that it keeps the sharpness across.
Right.
But not only does this lens, I think one thing that people forget about with this lens is that it actually does have a very pleasant bokeh.
Mm-hmm.
So doing portrait, if you compare this, of course that's part of what I do. I compare many lenses.
That's part of your job.
Of course, it's not all about sharpness. Right. It's also about the out of focus area. And this lens actually have a very pleasant out of focus rendition.
Yeah.
Which
it has to for the, you know, as the go-to portrait lens.
Yeah.
And the only other one that's, you know, a little bit faster with a little bit softer bokeh is the 110. Getting towards the end here, the 240. You know, I like giving the nice anecdote of Peter Eastway, which I don't think he'll mind me mentioning. We had Peter Eastway, an Australian landscape photographer, out to Denmark for the launch of our XF camera system last year. And he had been using the DF Plus with a 240 lens, and he was so certain that his 240 lens wasn't a good lens, and he brought it along with him to prove to us that it wasn't a good lens. And so we put it on his camera and used the XF in the autofocus, and it was great. And then we said, we'll just wait till the blue ring comes out. And so now we have the 240 blue ring, which is just that much better. So these lenses, I'll freely admit, are not the easiest ones to work with. They are big, they are long. If you're using 100 megapixel and you're not on a good sturdy tripod at a slow shutter speed, you get camera shake. And you don't get sharp results because of that. But when you get it right, it's unlike anything else. So still the 240 previous design, but built a bit more robust and built to last and built to the quality standards that the blue ring needs to have.
Definitely, I will mention here for landscape, we have on the XF camera this low vibration mode, which is really important. And the idea with this low vibration mode is that we're using the internal accelerometers in the camera to monitor any vibration in the camera.
Right.
So what we do is that we flip the mirror and we wait until all the vibration had died out, and then we take the picture, ensuring.
And then we're using the electronic first curtain shutter if you're shooting it slow enough. So we've got all the parameters there to make sure that this is going to be as sharp as possible. And do you have examples for the 240 that you want to show?
I don't know.
Okay, so what I do want to show is this one that I just shot last week. This is with the, if we go to the next slide here, this is with the 240 and the 2x converter. So it's effectively a 480 mil lens, which is no slouch. This was on a rail system that supports the lens and the camera body. It was on a tripod. It is manual focus at that point, but because my focus was so slight, and because I was trying to get a picture of these puffins, the focus ended up being me. This was the manual focus, just leaning in and out. So this is wide open with the 240 and the 2x converter, which is f9. But right here, if we zoom in on this image, you have tack sharp just on the eye, and you can see the little beads of water left on this puffin. So having the ability to use the 240 for wildlife, but then put the 2x converter on there is significant. And again, it's the same 2x converter that you would have maybe used previously for your silver ring lens that now you can just use with the blue ring, and everything works swimmingly. So do you use the 240 much, or is it?
I would say now with the 100 megapixel back and the use of
every time the 100 megapixel comes up, it's this.
With the ability to just go on the back of the IQ.
And do a live view and
zoom in, focus, and it's exact because it's shallow depth of field with this long focal length. But you can just put it exactly where you want it, and with the low vibration mode, I never come home with bad images. They are, of course, maybe the composition, but of course they would be.
You can learn that, but you need the technical specs to carry through. So we'll move on from that to get to the new bad boys of our collection here. So the 40 to 80 and the 75 to 150 were just announced yesterday as recently being blue ring, and again that just means that we've brought the lenses previously to a build quality and everything that we can now say this is the best this lens can be, and then we can give it the blue ring overhaul. So we've actually we only got the 40 to 80 in the office this morning at about 9:30 before the webinar, because these lenses have been out with photographers for some time. And there's a lot of photographers that use this lens pretty much exclusively. So this is a shot by Anthony Spencer, a UK photographer that he's been in love with the 40 to 80 for years. And we recently gave him the blue ring 40 to 80, and although he's been very satisfied with the previous lens, now having the blue ring, it's just a difference of this was great, now it's perfect. So the versatility in these lenses is significant with the focal length. 40 is almost 35, and 80 is what everyone has in their bag. So with one lens, you've covered your 35 for the most part, your 55, and your 80. So 3 lenses in one, and we've built them so that there is no real focus shift when you're zooming.
Yeah.
So you can
You-
with
you-
the 100 megapixel zoom in 100%, make sure everything's nice and sharp,
and you can back up.
back up, go in,
Yeah.
and everything's going to stay nice and sharp. So that focus breathing doesn't exist, which is significantly important. And Anthony's work is mostly landscape, so being out there in the field and just having one lens on the camera all the time, especially when he's out there in these storms. He doesn't want to be changing lenses under extreme conditions, or even he does a lot of aerial work, hanging out of a helicopter and things like that. So just having the one lens that you can recompose is incredibly beneficial. And then we'll go one more to our 75 to 150. So the 75 to 150, again, very, very similar in terms of how versatile it is and build quality as the 40 to 80 and the focus shift for the zoom. The 75 to 150 does have slight focus shift for the zoom, but the 40 to 80 pretty much has none. So again, just bringing these versatile lenses all the way to the best possible quality.
Yeah.
And you can have two lenses that covers pretty much everything.
But when you say it has focus shift, you might notice it wide open, but if you're stopped down, just one or two stop. Yeah.
Yeah, it's never a problem. Yeah. So we're very happy to have these be up to the quality that we expect and demand for the Blue Ring line of lenses. And I have just a few tips from what Anthony gave us. Did I put them in here? Oh, I thought I did. No, maybe not. Here's yours, the 75 to 150, and you were doing focus or
just to
zoom sweeps.
Yeah. So this is the 75, and we can just see zooming in here.
And you're doing no focus readjust in these images.
Yeah. And this is the range of zoom you have here, and again, it does have the same sharpness as a prime.
Mm-hmm.
It's corner sharp.
Yeah.
And now zoomed in. And here we might fight the depth of field, but still, it's okay.
Yeah.
At 150, you.
So, we have the whole lens range more or less, except for the 28, and now in our Blue Ring seal of approval, your seal of approval, if I may be so bold. And really, it kind of started with this one here. This is the Schneider 120 tilt shift, and it was the first one with a Blue Ring, unintentionally the Blue Ring, but it's a hand-built lens by Schneider, and it really just kind of showed us, what we could be getting out of some of these lenses and how we can just tighten everything up. So the Blue Ring family is now for the most part complete, and of course Phase 1 has no plans of stopping any development, so who knows what's going to be added to it in the future. But are you happy with the Blue Ring line of lenses?
Oh yes.
Now that you have the zooms. So just to recap, the whole family here in the Blue Ring badging, and it's built for full frame, of course, as we said at the top. We have no interest in building lenses that aren't going to resolve full frame medium format 645. So even when you get to IQ350, which is a crop sensor, you're using a sensor that's 1.5 times as small as the 100 meg full frame. So some of the older lenses, perhaps.
I have one comment here: is that the 28, if you are using the cropped sensors, and especially if you're using the 50 megapixel, then this could have been a Blue Ring, because then you're not.
So we can put it a Blue
and
Ring with an
it is
asterisk.
actually, in combination with the 50 megapixels, the 28 is actually, of course, because of the crop sensor, you don't see as wide. So with the 28, it's actually a very compatible with the 35 on the full frame.
Absolutely. And then again, it goes back, even this 35, which is small and light, and a lot of good glass in here if you're using a crop sensor.
Yeah.
So if you are using the IQ 350, you can pick one of these up for not as much, certainly, as the this 35, but it'll work wonders with that crop sensor lens. But going forward, the future development of phase 1 and everything, we are an actual medium format company where medium format means 645. And just to recap, the build quality, the optical tolerances, and then the internal electronics components are what we've really strived to make as excellent as possible. So we can, really give you guys quality that I'm sure you all expect from phase 1, and we, and certainly you, demand that we deliver. So we have David, who's been, we can swap again. We have David, who's been moderating here for us. I'm sure David, are you there? You want to just call out some of these questions?
I am.
Hey, David, how you doing?
Yep. I'm pretty good. I've picked out some of the questions and put them in the chat panel, so you can scroll through those and pick a few out in the time that we have allowed as well.
All right. Any doozies in there that we should? They're gonna, not
Nope, nothing that's gonna put you on the floor. Nope.
So the first one is a great one. Do you propose an upgrade path from the standard to the blue ring lenses? So let's say you have an XF with a 100 megapixel and an 80. That's the older one. Moving into the blue ring, would you make that as a suggestion? Being the image quality professor and not the sales guy.
I would say if you take tolerances, then means that with the design,
right,
there would be some very good, some average, some bad ones.
Right.
If you had one of the better ones, they could be as good as a blue ring.
Right.
So it's not that there's a safe answer to that one, saying that you would automatically get something better.
Right, and I think it's important to say that you do not need a blue ring if you have the 100 megapixel. We have lots of great lenses out there, even some of the old focal plane shutter lenses that work beautifully for the 100 megapixel. But going forward, who knows what the future is going to bring? And I think it's if you want to have the best and the best performing lens, without a doubt, then the blue ring lens is certainly the one that you should be moving into. Yeah. So maybe if it the older 80 millimeter lens falls off a table, perhaps has an accident, then rather than getting it repaired, it's time to get the blue ring lens. So will the 2X teleconverter receive a blue ring update? Of course, we don't talk about future products, but the 2X converter is very simple. There's no moving parts in it. The optics are very simple. So having to make it a blue ring to improve any tolerances is rather unnecessary. The only time that I think we would really have to look into it is the fit. You're introducing two more breakpoints for tolerance when you put the 2X converter on your camera system. So you have one between the 2X converter and the XF and one between the 2X converter and the lens. So if your tolerances are a hair's thickness and then you introduce something that has 2 hairs thickness of tolerance on either end, it could cause a problem. So maybe we'll update the 2X converter, but for right now, in everything that I'm sure you've done and everything that I've done, it works beautifully and just as I would expect. Another question from Paul, are the blue ring lenses LS leaf shuttered by default? Yes, of course. So, developing new lenses without the leaf shutter lens, I think, or without the leaf shutter, I think would be rather irresponsible of us, because it is something that people depend upon so much. So all the blue ring lenses are leaf shutter, full stop. Let's see. Using the 28 on the IQ250, just upgrade to the XF100. Does it perform on that sensor? So again, I think we've said, we've mentioned it a few times, but if you just want to reiterate the performance of the 28 on the full frame 645-100 versus the 50.
Yeah, the 28 does have quite a bit of chromatic aberration, which you see mostly in the corners.
Yeah.
And that even though you can compensate for it, it turns into kind of softness. That means that if you want to, like for architecture landscape, it needs to be stopped down between F11 and F14, and then you can actually, you can work with and get very good results.
Yeah. So we have one question. What is the weight of the 40 to 80? It's not light.
No.
I don't have the specs in front of me. On our website, though, the spec sheet does list the weight. I don't think it's in kilograms, but it's certainly not something you can just kind of throw in your backpack. You wouldn't bring the 40 to 80 with the 35, the 55, and the 80. It is there to replace the other lenses. But it is at least well balanced when it's on the camera with the ergonomics. So, good question from Stephen. How manipulated are the images that we're showing in Capture One? So, if you want to just pop over here again, and you can just look at a few of them, and we can turn on and off the chromatic aberration. Let's swap again. So you just move this screen down. Yep.
And the next one here, then I can see something.
There you go. So how manipulated are the images? The real answer is, they're not manipulated beyond defaults. And the defaults with the Phase 1 digital back and our lenses are very minimal. It's just there to clean up mostly things in the corners.
So I don't know actually, but we can always right-click and say take a new variant.
Right.
Then we get a new variant, which is it doesn't have the right white balance and all that.
Right.
And one of the things even though when you stop down, there's hardly any light fall off. I can control the light fall off in the lens tool.
Right.
But I actually
which is at 0 by default.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually like for the sky to add a little bit of vignetting. So I even go in and use the vignetting slider to get better framing, more interesting deep blues.
Yeah. And there's an interesting note in the software. We have chromatic aberration is on by default. It's clicked on up there in the upper left. But if you notice, there's 3 little dots next to that tool, so you can actually analyze the image individually. So when we talk about the older lenses, the older Schneider lenses, and having broader tolerances, if you get one that has, it's on the far side of tolerances, and now you have 100 megapixel, and you're noticing, well, there seems to be more chromatic aberration, you can actually analyze that specific image for chromatic aberration and apply that to the file, as opposed to using the default, the canned
maybe it's actually
aberration.
easier to see up here on well, this is this one here. Let's, if we zoom in here, you can. This is the default by.
This is what we. Well, you probably make it here in the studio.
But you can also, because there are variation, there are distances that might have an influence on the chromatic aberration. So you can always,
or even bokeh.
And even if you are working on a lens that is an old lens which is not known by Capture One, you can always go in here and say make an analysis.
Analyze that image.
Yeah, and then the chromatic aberration correction is not based on the generic, but it's actually made from
that specific file.
But
so if you click off,
we need to zoom in to really a high degree of here we have a white dark transition, and in this zoom level we don't see the difference. That just means that it's so little.
Right. So if you're pixel peeping, what level of corrections are on these files. If you're pixel peeping, I'm sure you can find something. But it's the default cleans it up, and that's where we want to be with the blue ring lenses.
Inside the sharpening tool we have, sharpening is we have defaults. And whether you are shooting a portrait or product or landscape, we only use one default.
Right.
But I always, for landscape images, go in and have my own settings,
Right.
because I want to typically work with a little less radius, less threshold, especially this new CMOS bags. You can lower the threshold on like 0.5,
Mm-hmm.
0.6, 0.4, and get even finer details in
As if
it's
that were possible.
yeah. So if you want to print really big and large, and doing landscape, that's where you can go in and pick up even more details.
Yeah. So you're saying, if we lower the threshold,
Yeah.
With the blue ring lenses and the 100 megapixel, we can actually get more detail than
Yes,
the default.
so in this example, I've lowered the threshold down to 0.3,
Mhm.
which works perfectly without getting noise picked up.
Right.
So.
Excuse me. All right, let's see what other questions we got here in the next few minutes of our beautiful
Yep.
presentation. Any weather sealing? There is no active weather sealing, but the camera is, built to be rather weather resistant. It's certainly not weatherproof, waterproof. But case in point, we just had it at POTUS in Ireland, where we were out in Irish weather, which can be a bit wet. And we didn't have any problems. Nothing's breaking. Of course, there is touchscreen technology on the XF. So once a touchscreen gets wet, it is a bit of a chore keeping it dry or just turning it off and using the dials. So is there any weather sealing? No active weather sealing, but the all components are built to be rather weather resistant. Is it possible to use a gyro stabilizer that might interface with the electronics of the back camera that might cause random errors? That is a very specific tech question, Anton. Of course, using the camera system, you're welcome to use a gyro for stabilization, but we have, as you noted, a few things in the camera system built into it. It's important to note that the lenses themselves have no image stabilization in the lenses. With medium format, it would be quite a task to be building image stabilization into the lenses. So using a gyro for stabilization is, of course, an option. The 150 LS shows quite a bit of chromatic aberration under certain circumstances. Is the new version improved in that area? That's a good question for you, Nils.
No, it still has a bit of chromatic aberration. Yeah.
So that's where we just showed you the analyze tool in the lens. So that's where when that comes in under those certain conditions, you just need to analyze the image to get a good indication of or good fix for that chromatic aberration. So does the blue ring over the previous 150 fix chromatic aberration? I'm sure the tolerances help improve it, but chromatic aberration being of the optical design and not the build design, it's still going to have some chromatic aberration under certain circumstances. I think if you're taking pictures of neon white things out in the sunshine, you might see it. Paul really likes your image of the castle in the water, so thanks, Paul. And head-to-head comparison for the zooms and primes side by side. So Andrew wants to know if we're going to do a head-to-head comparison between the zoom lenses, the 40-80, and the 75-150 against their prime equivalents. I don't think we have any plans to do it, but I would certainly welcome you to do it on your own. In my unstructured and not scientific tests, the 40-80 works just as good as the prime. It's a bit slower, of course, so if I need that 2.8, then I go to the prime. But I use the 40-80 quite a bit, 40-80 quite a bit, and I find it to be just as good, if not better, in some conditions than the 80 prime. So we don't have any plans to do a head-to-head comparison, but we would love to see somebody out there.
But aren't we planning on having downloads of raw images? So
we have a lens brochure and a full scope of our lens range with sample images that will provide raw file sample images.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some comparison. There's just not going to be a definitive this exact scene and this exact scene with the 1880 at least at this point. But it's something to consider, for sure. All right. Well, that brings us up to 11 o'clock, which is time for us to go get a cup of coffee and prep for 4 o'clock. So I want to thank everybody for coming. It's great to talk about the things we're doing to make sure the quality is up to snuff for the consummate professional. And Nils, thank you so much for joining me. I can go on and talk about these things, but you certainly add the degree of credibility for what we're talking about because you are the image quality professor. So thank you for coming. Thank all of you for joining us. And until next time, have a great one.